Hello and welcome to this edition of Startup Central. I'm Nayantara. This is the only show of its kind on Indian television, dedicated, of course, to startups, as the name suggests. It's here that we talk about entrepreneurship, tech, the new economy, anything you need to know about it. It'll be here on your favorite channel every weekday at sharp 6 p.m. Like all the stakeholders of the community that we get on the show, the team that puts the show together, the Startup Central team, thrives on constructive criticism. So keep writing into us so that we can take the show to the next level. Our email address right on top, suc@etnow.tv. Today's episode of Startup Central is dedicated to India's new rocket boys. Yes, we're calling them that here on the channel, taking it, maybe you could say it's premature, but look at the two developments that have happened over the span of 1 week. In 7 days, we first saw the launch of a rocket by Skyroot into space. It was called Vikram S. And, a very, very proud moment, becoming the first rocket launch by the private sector. Exactly a week later, it was Pixxel that launched a satellite. And today on the show, we will be touching base with Pixxel and one of their backers. This week, we're once again going to be talking to you about Spacetech. And why not? A lot of conversation is now happening about startups and the private sector launching off into space. And we're not only talking about Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk or Richard Branson here. It's a very proud moment for India, because what you have started to now see are space startups with really successful launches. About a week ago, it was the launch of the Vikram S, and we got to the founders here. Today, we get to the founder of Pixxel, Awais, who's now here with us, and the people who make it all possible, the VCs, Hemant Mohapatra from Lightspeed, also here with us. Thanks, guys, for being part of today's show. It's a very special show that's we're dedicating towards space exploration and what the private sector as well as startups can do. I'll come to you first. Yours was, the last launch we had over the weekend, about a week after Vikram S was successfully fired. Before anything else, it's a really, really proud moment. Tell us what went behind it.
Well, I think, it's a very sweet moment for the team. It's a moment that we've been waiting for the past 2.5 years, specifically for the launch of Anand, because there's been lots of ups and downs for this satellite. We talked when Shakuntala went up earlier in April this year, making it the first private satellite out of India. But I think Anand was even more special for us just because that was the first satellite our team got to work on when we started the company, when we had barely an idea of how to go about it. Initially, it was supposed to launch on an ISRO rocket in Feb of last year in 2021, but then due to a problem from a vendor that we were working with, we had to pull out from the launch. Of course, it was a very gutting moment at that point in time, but in hindsight, seems to have been the right move. And then from then we did a bunch of retests and ensured that we looked at all edge cases, and finally after an year worth of waiting for the ISRO PSLV C-54 to go up, it's finally up there. We traveled all the way to Sriharikota launch site with the larger team there. So it was a very sweet moment, a culmination of the hard work and the will of our team.
You had a demo satellite that went up into space in 2024. Followed by Shakuntala, which you talked about, and of course you gave us an interview after that, and now it's Anand. More hard work, a lot of new things you have to learn. There are obviously not many vendors out there as well that you can replace easily. But before I go to Hemant, can you tell me a little bit about what the utility of Anand really is going to be?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the mission with which we started Pixxel was to build a health monitor for the planet, and that's the vision statement that we are all working towards. And the way to do that was to be able to build and deploy a better kind of imaging satellite called hyperspectral imaging satellites. And we did that with the first demo and then Shakuntala earlier in April. So this is a continuation of the iterations that we are doing. So it's more of the move fast and break things ethos that generally seen in software, where you quickly iterate on things and see what's working, what can be made better. And so this is, the third iteration of the satellite bus and the camera that went in, giving us learnings as to what we could make better for the commercial constellation that will come next year. The use cases from hyperspectral imagery specifically, we will focus on climate change and a whole host of forest deforestation, measurement of carbon emissions, as well as agriculture and oil and gas leaks as well. So I think it's a spectrum of use cases, but predominantly focusing on making agriculture more efficient and detecting problems to the Earth's climate.
And with that, Hemant, I'll come to you. I remember seeing your tweet over the weekend where you were inviting positive vibes from people and, talking about how it's a great moment for space tech and Indian startups. You have backed Pixxel. It's Pixxel's launch was a week after the Vikram S launch that we had actually seen. Hemant, talk to us a little bit about and give us a VC's perspective on how hot this space is and, how things are culminating.
Yeah, thank you for having me again, Nayantara. Always a pleasure. So, I mean, look, when we invested in Pixxel, this was circa 2019, and we met Awais and Kshitij in a tiny room in our office in Bangalore. And I remember there's only one or two times in a year when you feel as a venture capitalist, when you feel like you're in the presence of greatness. It's a combination of amazingly technical founders with a lot of insight about what they are building, what's the importance of what they are trying to build. Very commercially minded, built a very strong team in the early days, and there is market and tailwind. So the funny thing is, it wasn't an easy investment for us. We were the first, I would say, top tier investor, institutional investor to do any space investment in India at the time. And I think we probably still the only one that have done something in space at the scale that Lightspeed is at. So it wasn't an easy investment. It wasn't obvious to any of us. I'm now hearing that when Anand was built, Awais is saying that he had no idea how to build it. We thought he had a much more of a nuanced point of view on what to build and how to build it. In fact, the amount of work we did to make the investment, which was a small investment at that time, was tremendous. So far, I feel like we have a lot of the things that we had predicted or had hoped that would come true has come true. Primarily, the involvement of the private sector in space in India. I think that has come an extremely long way. You even saw Prime Minister Narendra Modi also tweeting and retweeting about the successful launch that Pixxel has done. These are not things that happen in any part of the world, by the way. The head of a sovereign nation tweeting and talking about what we would still consider an early ecosystem and a startup in that ecosystem talking about it openly and frequently is not a common occurrence. So it gives you an indication of just how far we have come, from the early days of 2020 when we had only a handful of space and satellite companies in the country. Now we have about maybe 100 to 200 now. So it's a very thriving ecosystem.
Hemant, you're saying there are 100 to 200 startups now in this space, and can you give us a sense, because you might be evaluating them, you might be having access to them. How is it stacking up, let's say, against America or Russia? I'm just saying that because we all have read those Cold War stories, right?
Yeah. So going into the market that we are going, Nayantara, like in the next 4 to 5 years at least, we do expect that a lot of the investment dollars are going to go gravitate towards what I would consider very deep tech, IP-oriented, differentiated products and solutions. It could be in defense, it could be in data analytics and machine learning, it could be in infrastructure spending and so on and so forth. So I think with that trend line in mind, I feel like this ecosystem is bound to grow further. Now, I don't really know exactly what we are in as a ratio of the US space ecosystem. We are certainly not anywhere close. It could be as small as 1/10. But remember, we're only 2 years old, and the US space ecosystem has been at least 20 years around, around here, right? So that gap will take some time to cover. The space ecosystem is actually pretty vast. In a way, I'm sure has a lot more to say about it. But just in the Earth imaging, we have 3 or 4 categories around, optical imaging, which is where Planet Lab is. Synthetic aperture radar imaging, which is also an emerging category, in hyperspectral and multispectral, which is where Pixxel plays. But beyond that, there is obviously satellite telecommunication, which is by itself a very large market. There is stuff that is now being manufactured directly in space, like Varda Space in the US, that is manufacturing devices and optical cables directly in space in the low oxygen and vacuum environment. To reduce friction as well as rusting of elements there, and many of the things that are supporting the ecosystem, where we have companies in India that are building satellites, nanosatellites. They are building propulsion systems. They are building telematics and ground station control, and so many other things. So it's a pretty vast and thriving ecosystem. But we certainly have a long way to go to capture, the burgeoning demand, which is always going to grow further from here, given how cost effective launching stuff in space has become over the last few years.
And Awais, what we've also seen is at least a government which is allowing the private sector finally to participate in space exploration wants to take great pride that this exploration is also happening at affordable costs or more competitively, right? We all saw the Mangalyaan, for example, the Mars mission, the Chandrayaan, which went to the moon, and it's been touted as the cheapest mission to the moon. Is that what the government is also pushing entrepreneurs and founders like yourselves to do?
So I think not a particular push exactly around that, but I think the biggest advantage that has come in the last 2 years has been just clarity around the fact that space companies can do these things and that there is a policy and framework around it. The low cost nature of it and the way to do it frugally in India comes from a long heritage of what ISRO has done, right? So when it was set up in the 1960s, it was a very different setup from other space agencies. NASA was set up very clearly to be able to do cutting edge stuff that no one had done before, such as sending, people to the moon, as well as building instruments that can help understand the solar system better. Versus the setting up of ISRO was for a very different purpose altogether. It was to be able to bring self-reliance from building technologies that would help serve the country in the first place, right? And that's something that has continued for the past few decades. But in terms of setting up of the infrastructure, doing things cheaply, like you mentioned in the case of Chandrayaan or Mangalyaan, has come out of the fact that there's much lesser budget in India allocated to space activities than there is in other countries, and thereby necessity breeds the success and innovation that comes from it. Now, on the basis of that infrastructure and expertise that's set up thanks to ISRO, the private companies are taking off from here. So I would say the low cost nature of it is a big bonus. Manufacturing here, keeping things low is a big bonus, but the major innovation and the growth will come from having strong IP, having strong innovation, and building things and solutions and technologies that no one else has built before. It's not just a matter of replicating it cheaply here. It's a matter of building and building on top of things that then Indian companies can compete globally with global behemoths on. So I would say it's built into the ethos to do it, efficiently, but it's more of the innovation that will really set us apart and not the low cost thing, which happens to be a big bonus.
So that's just a big bonus. Would the VC agree, Hemant?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the ecosystem is still early days, but like I said, I think it's bound to grow from here. It's bound to grow from here, and then we are really sort of starting to sense that many more companies are now coming up from everywhere in India, servicing global demand.
Fair point. And Hemant, it has been said that we are now at an inflection point. We've started to see the private sector in the US, for example, take to space. So with what happened, let's say, with Skyroot, and a week later with Pixxel, is it too early to call them India's new rocket boys, or at least to say, yeah, India's private sector space mission has now officially launched?
I'm going to borrow that phrase and then start teasing Awais and Kshitij about being the new rocket boys of the country. But look, I think we can't sit on our successes so far. We are still very, very early. In terms of proving out technology risk, I think some are ahead of the others and some are just starting off. And especially in terms of proving out demand and then commercializing the solutions at a global stage. I think we are still a couple of years ahead of that, but we are liking what we are seeing. As an investor in Pixxel, the sort of demand we have seen for their hyperspectral imaging is absolutely world-class. We have never seen as much demand coming in as quickly as it has. Now, we have to go service it with the right product, with the right solution, with the right support. And we got to keep innovating. We can't be sitting on our laurels now, but the demand has been exceptionally surprising. And I wasn't expecting it when we invested at the seed round. I really wasn't expecting it.
What are you going to do with all of these images, Awais? I would love to know that.
Absolutely. Let me take a few examples, right? So as Hemant was mentioning, we have thankfully a lot of customers around the globe reaching out to us on our website because they have been waiting for hyperspectral data for a long while, but no one was able to provide it from space. And we have been reaching out from our end to companies around the globe that we think have a need for making their operations more efficient. One of those examples would be Rio Tinto, one of the world's largest mining companies. What we are specifically helping them is we take images of the mines that they currently have operationally active, and we look at these specific things called tailing ponds, Tailing ponds are essentially all the waste material and the liquid that comes out after the actual ore is extracted, that is used for making metals. And that tailing pond has the capacity to actually pollute the soil health and the water health and the biodiversity health around the areas that those mines are in. And in most cases, there are lots of people living around that area. So by monitoring these mines on a very regular basis, almost weekly, we're able to say that there's probability of a leak here and it's causing this harm to the environment, and it might lead to problems for the people that are living downstream from a stream that's coming through that mine. That's one example. We've also signed contracts with oil and gas companies where we specifically take images of where the pipelines are. And whenever there is a gas leak, for example, from any of these pipelines, these pipelines are thousands of kilometers long and go through very remote areas where you'll not be able to send people or even have sensors for that matter. So with our satellites in space, we're able to see that there's a methane leak here, or there's an underground oil leak here. And then we can intimate the oil and gas company that there's a leak here, which is causing harm to the environment, which is causing problems again to the biodiversity sort of around there. And finally, we work with a lot of agricultural companies. We take images of the farmland before the crop is grown to see what the soil nutrient content is. If there's nitrogen missing there or there's phosphorus missing, what fertilizer can you use to actually make the soil more efficient for you to grow? And once the seeds are grown, how the crops are actually growing. Is there enough irrigation there? Are they getting enough water? Do they have enough chlorophyll content? How is their health? And by using those information points, the companies or organizations that we work with can then impart that information to the farmer so that they can increase their yield and decrease the loss that actually occurs. So that's how the images are being used today. We will expand to a lot more use cases, but this is where we are focusing on with the clients that we are working with today.
I'm going to ask the next question on behalf of all of you that might be looking at this space and get the money point. Now, for all of this to be successful, companies like Pixxel have to be profitable, and they have to continue to remain profitable to keep doing these missions and to have the employees and all the other overheads. So, Hemant, for all of these images, give us a sense. How much are they sold for? Is it usually a contract that businesses sign with such space tech companies? This is all very, very new for us. We have no idea how it works.
Yeah. So look, I mean, we are now in a place where data from space is like gold.
Data is
Imagine how hard it is. Yeah, gold and oil. So it is so hard to put anything into space. It is just so hard. So few people are able to build something that can be launched into space, and so many fewer people can launch something in space that actually works. And once you across that hurdle, what you beam down is so rare that you can basically call the price in the market, right? So when we looked at the category itself, we had a bunch of companies that were going full stack, like Pixxel. By full stack, what I mean is they build the satellite, they build the bus, they build the payload, they launch it on a launch vehicle, like it could be a Skyroot vehicle, could be a GSLV, could be a SpaceX rocket, and then they put something in space that beams down good data regularly over the next 5 to 7 years. And then they build something else in the meanwhile and then launch that and then beam data back. Now, that's the full stack model, but it is expensive. You're going to have to build IP for the satellite, for the bus, for the payload, and the actual camera tech is not easy to build. Very few companies in the world are able to even do half a good job at the resolution that the customers are demanding. So that's the hard model. The easy model is you are just a marketplace. You bring data from everybody else, and then you aggregate data on one side and you aggregate demand on the other side, and you sort of you take a cut of the volume that is being exchanged. We saw companies across both. The latter company had been able to scale quickly because they didn't have the overhang of the capex that is required to build satellites and send them up in space. But we believe, and we still strongly hold on to that belief, after 2.5, 3 years of being in Pixxel, that the right model is the hard model. You build the hard stuff, you launch the hard stuff, and then you can call the downstream pricing for it. So we can basically demand the pricing that we think the market will support. And some of these contracts, we're expecting the large ones, without naming customers, could go up to $10 million a single client. And Awais will tell you more details on how that is panning out, but that's what we expect.
Awais, come in here. So basically, you've got the demand where you have clients, and you don't have to name them, that are willing to pay you $10 million for these images. How does it work? Is it going to be, a certain amount of images in a year, from when the satellite is up there?
Yeah, usually these in most cases are business to business multi-year contracts. So we know that for the next 3 years, we have to provide imagery, or for the next 5 years, you have to provide imagery, for the next 10 years, you have to provide imagery. So the length of the contract varies depending on what scale of company that you're dealing with. But in most cases, those are 3-year or higher multi-year contracts. How it works is fairly simple. Let's, for example, take company A that has 100 square kilometers of land that they want monitored every week. And hypothetically, we are pricing it at $1 per square kilometer. So for those 100 square kilometers, each image that they get for week 1, they're paying us 100 times one, $100 for that image. And then it multiplies 52 times a year because they're taking it weekly, and that becomes $5,200 for that year, right? And there's just example numbers to make it easy, but that's sort of how it works. We have a area that is given to us by a customer. It could be acreage from an ag client. It could be the number of miles or kilometers of a pipeline from an oil and gas company. It could be the acres or the square kilometer acreage of a forest land somewhere that someone wants to monitor. And we know that this is the area that needs to be monitored every day or every 3 days or every week. And depending on the scale, they pay us on a monthly recurring basis, but these are usually multi-year contracts. That's broadly how it works. Of course, there are one-off requests from certain governments that they want to see how their country is doing or how the forest cover has changed. But in most cases, these are very predictable multi-year contracts.
My final question before I let you go, Awais, and this is for all those that are tuning in, are obsessed with space like yours, want to follow their dreams, they're about to follow their dreams, ready for launch, etc., etc. How was it working with ISRO? The private sector is now being allowed, but you're still going to need ISRO's help for your launches and for everything else. How has that been? I don't mean, shower praises, etc. I mean, if you could share with us, which could then be lessons for the next space guys.
No, absolutely. I think so. When we started, there was no official way of engaging, right? So we had to go at it solo. So the way that early companies are built is, regardless of the support, we will still continue to chug away. But, having ISRO there support us speeds up a lot of things, saves us cost on a whole lot of things. For example, what would have probably taken us 6 to 12 months to set up a testing facility of our own, spend millions of dollars just setting up that facility, we quickly reached out to ISRO to see if we could access their testing facilities in Bangalore, where we took our satellites and we tested it and we quickly brought it out in a couple of weeks, right? And that's something that saved us months of work and saved us millions of dollars, etc. And of course, there's obviously a lot of expertise with the folks that have been working on these kinds of rockets and satellites for not only years, but decades, that are telling us what to do, but more importantly, what not to do, what have they tried and what has failed. And so that we can quickly get that out of our learnings and then move on to build on top of that. So I would say that's predominantly with the help there. So specifically for Anand, it was the first private satellite ever in the country that ISRO gave access to. And then from there,
go ahead.
Yeah, so I think they helped us get access to testing facilities at the facility that they had, and their experts have been there all along the while, helping us with the integration of the satellite on the rocket and giving us guidance as to how to make it work and how to operate there. So that is something that you can't really pay any money for. That's just something that you get to be a part of an ecosystem that has as rich of a heritage as ISRO has.
So there are things that money cannot buy, including MasterCard. So that's been the big learnings from ISRO. We're completely out of time, and we try to get you like a full perspective on, the big launch that took place, of course, on November 26th is the third one from Pixxel, a week after we saw Skyroot also launch a rocket into space. We got to the VC perspective, we've got to the founder's perspective. Many thanks for tuning in, and many thanks to my guests for being so candid today on the show.
Thank you, Nayantara, for having us.
Thank you, Nayantara.
We had also hosted the founders of Skyroot after their rocket launch, a successful rocket launch of Vikram S. Here's a quick recap of that conversation.
The only way to increase the Indian space market share is to let the commercial space industry boom in India. And with that conviction, even the policy in 2020 that unlocked the space sector for private industry is exactly enabling this. So not only in launch domain, in satellite manufacturing domain or applications domain, in all these domains, with more private players come in India, India is known to be one of the most cost-effective space mission executor world over, and everyone knows how effective, cost-effective our interplanetary missions are also. So the same cost-effectiveness can be leveraged by private industry also to offer affordable, reliable space-based solutions from India to the world. So once we make the space access as affordable as possible, like the solutions from Earth will be able to cater to all the natural resources problem that we can address by leveraging and taking back the abundant resources in space.
It's still very expensive to go to space. And once that barriers are broken, when it becomes very, very affordable and reliable to go to space, I think everything like space tourism, getting minerals from space, etc., become a reality, and that makes human life much, much better than what it is today. The way forward is to welcome more and more foreign direct investments. In fact, like we are pushing for something like 74% of foreign direct investment into the country, and then several tax incentives for startups is already there within the country, which is really helping us startups get to the first big milestone. And beyond that, in fact, like one of the biggest change which can happen in the country would be very strong collaboration between the government space program and the private space program. In fact, like if the private entities, once they prove their mettle, they are also made part of the Indian space program by the government. I think that would be also a wonderful change which can happen in the future. So basically, greater FDI, tax benefits, better tax benefits, and even the PLI schemes, and also like a good collaboration between the government and the private sectors would be like a big boost forward for the space sector in India.